Guys, guess what? Today...
Hi, I'm the ghost of Christmas future, and I'd like you to take a moment to look how happy this guy looks, how excited he is to be doing a piece of colonial iron, yet he has no idea the hell he is about to unleash in this video.
We're going off the reservation. So Jay Riekert once said, never perform in public what you have not perfected in private. And today that's just going right out the window, because as we've been doing projects over the past couple weeks, we've been doing relatively simple projects, the cant hook, things of this nature. Today we're going to get into the weeds, and we're going to be making a trivet from the Sorber collection. Now you guys hear me mention the Sorber collection a lot. The Sorber collection is a book of colonial ironwork, and when I'm looking for ideas, what to do, that's the book that I go to, and there's some fairly complicated pieces in there. So even in the heat, what's been happening is we usually want to get out here in the morning, spend an hour, hour and a half, and bam. But we need something with a little bit more beef and a little bit more meat. And there's a trivet in there, and we'll throw a picture up so you can see what I'm talking about, that not only has complicated forge welds, but it also has a wooden handle, a threaded wooden handle. It's gonna be a monkey. So today we are back out here with the gnats. Now you may hear the fan in the background because the gnats are insane today. So there's no way that I would be able to function, or my camera people, because if the gnats are in here, my camera people look like they're doing the YMCA behind the camera, and I can't work like that. So if you get a little fan noise in the back, you're gonna have to tolerate it because we're in that Georgia July heat. But, so this trivet, there is a certain sequence of things that must happen in order for this trivet to come together, none of them of which I know how to do. So understand that in this process, it depends on how this project turns out, because I don't know how, there may be significant screw-ups. I essentially have a picture with no measurements whatsoever. So everything that we're doing is based on swag, the scientific wild-ass guess of how this thing was put together. So let's go over to the anvil, and I'm going to show you how we're going to start, and then we're going to get into it. This should be a fun one, guys. Let's go. So guys, starting out, we're going to make the trivet body itself. Now this trivet is not necessarily complicated because of the body. It's actually the decoration in the center and the handle that's going to be the problem. It's pretty cool, but so first thing though, we're going to start off by making the trivet body with only 2 sides welded as opposed to all 3. So what happens here is I've got this set up here. You can see I've tack welded it. The approach right now is we're going to fuse this. So when you put baby powder in your gloves, you have this cool little puff effect there. So just, sorry, I was somewhat distracted. That's just, emphasize the point. So, all right, we're going to fuse this bad boy right here. This piece, however, which is the base of our trivet, you can see I've actually got it marked because I'm going to need to punch essentially a 1/4 inch hole right there. That's just so cool. I need to punch myself a 1/4 inch hole right here. So I had to back up. I needed some accoutrement here because I was trying to explain this, guys, in a way that it made sense, and there's just no way to do it without drawing. So let me show you what's so complicated about this piece. So looking from top down, there is the triangle of our trivet. Now the decoration in this other trivet, what happens is there is a wooden handle right here. Then there is a central piece that's going to be made out of 1/2 inch square bar that is tapered, and it's actually fused in this weld here, and then we have some arms that come off and do this. And there is a gnat in my nose that I'm about to lose my brains over. Okay, focus. So the trivet is complicated because this piece right here, now not only are we going to have to do some relatively delicate forge welds to put our little curls on, this is really the monkey in constructing, because this piece is going to have to be made like this. We're going to have to do a tenon joint with a 1/4 inch tenon that will then fit through this 3rd leg. This piece here will have to be tapered, and then this taper will be fused in the joint between the outside walls of the trivet. Make sense? Not to me either, but we're going to try it anyway. So today I have upgraded my my shaker here. I bought one of these little tin cans off and I punched some holes in the top. So now instead of having to flux everything by hand, I can do a little shaky and it won't be as messy in previous videos. These are super handy. I actually use these on my demonstrations. We're going to start by putting this in the fire, and we're going to weld up about 2 inches of this, and that was the measurements that I laid off. So first weld right here, 2 inches with some shaky, and hopefully no gnats in my sinuses. You've got an excellent welding heat. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to weld this first 2 inches. This should be super easy. I'm going to go back and take one more weld just for safety. Let me get my shaky while we got it here. And again, a little shaker like this, even like a salt shaker, man, does a great job. As you can see that when I was doing it by hand, it really got everywhere, but this does an excellent job of just powdering it and making everything stick. So let's take a safety weld and we're going to move on to the next thing. Okay, we've got a good weld. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to put this in the vise at the 2-inch mark. Now we're welded, and that's great, but we're not going to actually, normally what we would do is we take this piece and we'd pull this down into our foot. We're not going to do that yet. We're just going to go ahead and open this up so that we can make the second weld with our third piece, which is what I'm calling our base piece, because that is the piece that's got to be punched and is going to hold our handle. So just pop this in the vise and we'll open it up. So here is our base piece of our trivet. So we've got to make a couple modifications to this to get it ready for forge welding it into the rest of the frame. First amongst is going to be that center dot right there. We're going to need to punch a hole through this, again about 1/4 of an inch, and plus we're also going to actually take these tabs, those 2 inches we are going to weld, and I'm going to pre-bend them so that they fit into the trivet frame itself a little bit better. So I'll take a heat here in the middle, I'll do the punching first, and then we'll bend these tabs. We're looking pretty good. All right, so there's our mark in the center, and pretty mundanely I'm going to roll this in here. Remember, as you're working your tools, make sure and rotate them. That will minimize the issues you have from a punch that is not completely round or has some distortions in it. I'm going to start here. One more again. Clean punch. And remove and drop. And as you guys can see, we've got a good sized hole there. Now that's probably a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch, but that's okay. If we need to come back in and clean that up with a drill bit, we'll be fine to do that. Now I'm going to straighten this out and then bend our tabs. Now conveniently, this piece right here that I have facing my jaws is actually a 2-inch angle iron, or it was at least. So that allows me to measure off a really nice 2-inch bend accurately and easily. So now we'll just go back and do the other side and we'll get ready to weld everything up. And real quick, here we go with our second bend. Make sure that's in the ballpark. There we go. All right, and that should prep us for our next welds. All right, guys, let's look at what we got here. So we have one weld with our piece here. This is our base piece, and what's going to have to happen next is we're going to have to attach one corner here. Now, maybe. Yeah, I already screwed up. So what has to happen is we actually have to have the opposite joint from this piece welded, not welded, so that we can add the centerpiece. And there is no way to attach this that I have not already welded this piece here. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to have to heat this up and split this weld back out. And then we're going to have to come in here and attach these two legs to this piece here. Yeah, that sucks. So, but that's okay. I'm gonna see if I can't take a heat, and I'm gonna use my chisel and see if I can't break that back up, which should not be a big problem. But again, my brain not think all good, and yeah, so we're not off to a great start here, boys and girls. But let me crack this and then get ready to weld these pieces up. Now, I know I said, thank God, my welding sucks, but what a great opportunity to show you what the inside of a weld looks like. This was actually a pretty good weld. You can see all that gray metal where it's come apart. So we had a pretty darn good fusion there. Not too much of a problem here, just a bit of an aggravation for the lack of my foresight into understanding how I had to put this thing together. But now we'll take our third piece, wherever I may have put it, and start welding this up again. Now we are properly prepped for welding. This is what it should look like. You can see that this is our base piece, and you can see what I've done is I've end-tacked these with the welder. Now, the way I weld these up with the tack is I do put it right here on the end, because that's the piece that's going to get hammered and distorted the most, and that's going to give you the greatest opportunity to actually distort what would otherwise be a noticeable modern weld. So we're going to hammer the patootie out of it. But what will happen is once we get this welded up, then we're going to make our centerpiece, because when we form that centerpiece, these two legs will close over a taper and seal it in place. So it'll be mounted here and in the weld itself. So at least that's the plan. So now we just need to hop in here, fuse these properly, and then we can get on to our centerpiece. We've got a good solid heat, and that's going to weld up very nicely. Make sure and keep everything nice and even. I'm going to reflux, and I'm going to take one more safety weld. Sprinkle, 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 and back into the fire. Okay, so there we are. We've got a good weld here, just one more, and we're ready to start on our handle. We got a good solid heat for our initial weld. Again, look, we're not killing it, we're just making her stick. Seems to have done the trick, but I'm going to reflux and go take a full welding heat. Good heat. All right, she looks good. Now we've completed our welds in the proper place, of course, and now we've got to make our center holder. Now this is going to be a little bit tricky. I say tricky. It's going to be a little bit more difficult than usual, because we're going to need to make a tenon to extend through here that's going to have to be threaded. So I'm going to start with a piece of 1/2-inch bar. I debated on going up with something a little bit thicker, but since the smaller pieces that I'm going to make our scroll work out of is that same size, I think we're going to stick with it there. So it's going to be 1/2 inch. I will use the spring fuller to actually make a neck and then draw out the 1/4 inch piece, and then we'll figure out what length we're going to have and what taper we're going to have. So let's set this to the side and let's start working on our 1/2 inch bar. All right guys, we got our 1/2 inch bar, and I know I'm going to need, set that in there. I'm not going to need that much, but I'm going to take about 1 inch and work this down. Give myself a relatively clean shoulder. Now am I going to take a little bit more than that? I'll tell you what I am. I am going to take just a tad bit more than that. You know, sometimes things are hot and you don't want to touch them. All right, that's a little closer to what I'm looking for. Now, ideally, when you're doing this tenon work in heavier steel, you're going to use a monkey tool to clean that shoulder up. In this case, I'm going to draw this out to 1/4 inch, and then I will probably come back in with some file work just to make that nice and clean, as opposed to trying to use a monkey tool on it, because I don't have a 1/4 inch monkey tool. So, one more heat, and let's start drawing that stuff out. All right, guys, here we go. Start pulling this out. Now I'm going to keep this at a high heat. 1/2 inch bar, converting it down to 1/4 inch does not just require twice the effort. It requires a lot more than that. So I'm going to keep this at a high heat and continue to work it out. All right, guys, here we go. Continuing pulling this stuff out. Notice how I'm using that shoulder as my stopping point to do the work. Now, there are top and bottom tools for doing or sizing exactly what I'm doing here. 1/4 inch is a little small on that size for it, but they are out there and you can make them. Now, for me, I just don't do any of this super small tinning, so I usually don't have those tools made. So I'm a bit of a liar. I actually did make one of these tinning tools, but however, it's a spring swage that's not designed for the anvil. This is actually designed for the power hammer, because what would happen is I'd have my piece I was working on and this piece in my left hand, and I could fit it in. So this is actually not mounted up for my anvil, but I do have one. This comes in 3 sizes: 1/4 inch, 3/8, and 1/2 inch. So yeah, it's a handy tool. It's worth the time to make, especially if you're getting into more complicated projects that require tinning. It will save you a lot of time. There's no two ways about it. It's just, you know, I don't do that much of it, but that may be changing very shortly. Now, if you guys ever wonder where like set hammers come into play, this is really it, because you can see that even though I have that there, one missed strike is going to mess that whole piece up. So that's where you have a buddy hold the work, and then you have set hammers to set it into place and then strike it, and that allows you to do very precise work without, you know, having a gnat fly up your nose and making one bad hit and screwing up the whole lines of your pretty piece. So that's where those set tools come in. So we're getting close to where I want to be. Now, normally, you know, you could just be super haphazard with this piece, but not even getting it through the hole is the problem, because what's going to happen is after we get it through the hole, we are actually going to end up threading this piece. So I'm going to have to spend a significant amount of time either hand filing or at the sander to make sure that the piece that we're going to tap, or thread rather, is going to be a 1/4 inch in diameter. But right now, that's close enough. I want to leave myself enough beef to work with. But one thing I do want to show you is getting into this shoulder. Now, first thing, I am going to go to my nice 2x72 grinder, because I can hand file that, but it's going to take forever. But I will need to hand file that shoulder. So I'm going to spare you guys all the aggravation of watching that be hand filed and show you how this works. So guys, one of the ways that especially if I'm going to be tapping something or threading something, this is a drill gauge. This is like indispensable in my shop, because we have a whole bolt bin of different drill bits, and this is how I figure out how to put stuff back. These are little plates that you can buy at Lowe's or anywhere else, and they are absolutely sized for all different types of drill bits. And in this case, this is a handy tool, because if you're going to thread something, it has got to be it cannot be over the appropriate size because you will break that tap. So what I use is kind of a go, no-go gauge. Is there's a 1/4 inch hole right there, and as long as that piece can fit down there through comfortably, you can use the appropriate size tap on it. So that's a handy trick. Now this piece has been done. We've got a good 1/4 inch piece there, but that shoulder is going to be a problem. I really want to have a good, nice, snug fit up against the wall of our trivet. So what I'm going to do now, and this is, you really can't even do this on a modern sander. You really need to use the hand file here or a type of monkey tool. But I'm going to go into the vise, I'll lock this in, and I'm going to use that hand file to round this off to give myself a good 90-degree shoulder to our tenon. So let me lock that up. We're going to zoom that bad boy camera in, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. So guys, back in the day, a tremendous amount of work on metal was done with a hand file. In the Sorber collection book, it talks about some of the finer pieces that had chiseling and all that had been sent to the whitesmith. And the whitesmith was the guy that worked in pewter and things of this nature. And they were really finish guys. And so much of the decoration that we call the fine work in ironwork was done by the whitesmith with those hand files. Now the first thing I'm doing is I'm using the file. I'm using the file flatly. I will be filing flatly upon the flatulence. I'm using the file in a flat method to establish the shoulder against the bar. And once I've done that, I will turn it vertically to clean up the bar itself. Notice I'm not putting a super amount of pressure on here. I'm just letting the teeth of the file really do the work. Not a lot of super pressure. Just taking those quick bites. You always know when I'm concentrating because I shut up. Okay guys, let's take a super close look at this and I'll show you what we've done. So guys, here's our moment of truth. This is a complete failure. Scrap the video, we're done. All right, let's try this one more time. Now guys, all joking aside, I told you that hole may not be exactly perfect, and well, it's never going to be exactly perfect. So basically I just ran a 1/4 inch bit down in there, and you can see that it fits well. Now, you can see it binds right there just a little bit. I am absolutely unconcerned with that, because once this piece is hot, I'll be able to tap it right down and it will seat very well. And you can see, hopefully you can see that the fit will be pretty good as well. So I'm very happy with this. The only real concern was making sure that this was a 1/4 inch so that when we come in here and tap this, we are good to go. So that is going to be a success. And now we're going to pull this bad boy out. We're going to measure it against our piece here, see about where we've got to have that taper, and then we're really going to get into doing one of the most suspicious forge welds of this entire project. So guys, now that we have our piece here, I am going to use that swag ability to figure out exactly where I'm going to cut this to start our work. Because what will happen is this piece will sit into there, and then we're going to have a taper, and then these pieces will come together, and this piece will actually nest in between the forge weld. So this whole thing is forge welded together. Now, I'm going to say that between everything, I think right there is going to be a good guess. So I'm going to pop that out. I'm going to put this on the corner here on my cutting hardy. And I'm going to put myself a mark. So I'll heat that up, come right here and just cut that loose. And then I'll start working I'll taper this just on two sides. This won't be a point, this will just be a flat wedge. And then it's going to get hinky when I show you what we're going to do for our added decoration. Now, over these past videos, you've seen me time and time again slip over to that MIG welder and zap things into place. If you are in the shop by yourself, man, it's a lifesaver. You want to make an effort to kind of hide those welds, of course, because if you don't do a full forge weld, sometimes you can actually tell that there was a modern weld used. But for the most point, almost invisible. Now, as a point of pride, you can do it the absolute traditional way. There's no particular problem with that. But don't trip over your own self trying to do it the most absurdly authentic way, because at the end of the day, your job is to produce a good product. And if you are really making a terrible product because you can't do it the old way, you're not doing anybody any favors. So don't be afraid to use a couple of cheats here and there to produce good quality work. All right, I'm going to find my mark, which is about right there. And I'm going to cut this bad boy loose. Swap over to the appropriate tongs, which for once I actually fit correctly, because of course, since 1/2 inch square stock is something I use tremendously in the shop many times, I actually have the tongs fitted, and that's absolutely critical. Now I'll come back in, take one more heat, and start thinning this down. Now, in a perfect world, if you wonder how blacksmiths got everything so precise that when they started with the right size stock and it came out just perfectly, what you're missing is that that blacksmith probably did that project a couple of 100 times, right? So everything has been gone through so many times, they know the exact cuts to make. If you're doing these one-off projects, you want to keep in mind that you start with more material that you need. Even here, what's most likely going to happen, because I'm scientifically wild-ass guessing, is I'm going to start hammering this out and I'm going to realize I've got too much material. So what am I going to do? Throw in the cutting hardy and just start nipping the tip. Now, the outside section of the trivet's about 3/4 of an inch, so it's a little bit bigger than the 1/2 inch bar here. So instead of bringing this back down to 1/2 inch, I'm just going to let it swell. I'm really just mostly concerned with the length at this point. Okay, that's looking kind of sort of close. I think I want some more length on there. Yeah, I'm gonna taper that just a little bit more just to get myself some extra length, because yeah, I've got about 2 inches of play here is how far it can go in, and I want just a tad bit more. So unlike other things in my life, I'm able to give myself an extra 2 inches. So I think that's going to fit very well right there. I think that's going to be good enough. We're going to try it right there. So what I'll do now is I'm going to come in and I'm going to heat these guys up and go ahead and pull them in, and then we'll see if we can't slide this into place and go from there. So I've moved my other side. I'm going to squeeze this in just by hand, maybe a little bit of hammer. So there we go. We've got her set up there. And now we're going to take our other piece and just kind of slide it in there to check to see how far our taper is going to extend into our weld. We got our piece here. Let's check it out there. I'm going to tell you folks, if you guys can see that, that's about as perfect as it can get. That's excellent. That should do the trick 100%. So what I'm going to do is just make sure that I've got plenty of relief on this, so that'll slide in easily. And now the trick becomes just getting this piece in there without tearing anything up. Make sure it's set properly, and then closing everything up and together. All right, fellas, now I'm trying to figure out a great way to do this, and I don't know if there's a great way to be had, but because really what I want to do here is I want to tap this to seat it, and I can't get my hammer head down in there, so I'm going to see if I can't. All right, how about that? I am okay with that. I do need to twist it a little bit there to adjust it. Give it a little twisty. That is not going to work, so I'm going to have to go to the vise, so I've got a better hold on this. So let me swap over to the vise and adjust it. I tried to get away with it, but it just did not happen. So I lock it in the vise, so I've got a good place to work from. I'm going to take my vise grips here, and I'm just need about 1/8 of an inch twist. Remember what I told you about leaving that base a little bit bigger so it wedges? Boy, that comes in super handy when you're adjusting. But there she is. She looks good right there. Now comes the problem. So guys, what's going to happen here is I'm going to end up doing 2 forge welds to add these pieces to make our decorative scrolls. And so you can now see what a pain in the hind end this is going to be. Now I'm going to take this piece out to be able to do these welds, but the real issue here is the fact that that 1/4 inch piece down there, boy, that can melt quickly. So can this. So this is going to be some super delicate work. Now also the order of the forge weld. Do you do the thick one down here, or do you do this one right here? In this case, the proper answer for me is to do the inside scrolls first, which are going to be about right here. Now I'm going to take myself some soapstone, and I'm going to put a mark here and a mark here so I can kind of gauge where these guys are going to sit. Once they're welded, then I'm going to do some basic scrolling and then try to kind of jiggle and fit them into the available space. That's the plan. I'm going to tell you something. Failure is absolutely an option here. So guys, you can see my marks. Now what I'm going to do where I've done these marks is I'm going to come in with the short pieces, and I'm going to tack weld them to our bar, and then very carefully try to get at least 3/4 of an inch worth of weld on this piece. Once that happens, I will come down and try to do the same thing for the rest of this. We are dealing with thinner material in a tight space, and that's going to be a problem. Now, no, I'm not going to forge weld it inside our triangle here. I'm going to remove it. But this is still some very delicate work, and it is very easily bent. And this piece is also still very hot, so I'm trying to balance it a little bit because it's starting to cook my fingers. Now, before I can even do that, though, I've got to take our pieces here, which are 3/16 by 1/2 inch, and I'm going to need to actually scarf these in to prep them for the forge weld. I will scarf both ends. One scarf will be for the weld, but the other will be just the decorative taper for the end of our scroll. So all 4 sides have got to be done on this. All 4 sides? Well, that's a bad number. There's like 2 sides per piece, so there's like 8 to be done. Math's tough when there's gnats in your nose, folks. All right, guys, here we go. So here is our first sacrificial virgin for the volcano. You can see we've got our 2 arms on here. Now, one thing I'm going to suggest to you, if you're going to cheat like I do, and you're going to use the MIG weld to tack everything into place, which I highly recommend, make sure that when you weld it, go back over the top of your weld with the grinder, just like you would be doing if you were doing, proper modern fabrication. This does a couple of things. Mainly, of course, we really want to disguise any type of modern work on here. If you leave bubble gum or weld spatter around where you made your tack, sometimes that can transfer through to your final piece. So do yourself a favor, as a matter of good practice, grind that tack down, make it nice and blended, and you're going to find out that when you go back and complete your forge weld work, it will be almost invisible. Now guys, I wanted to do a close-up right here because I want to show you something very important. Now this is going to be where the hind end puckers a little bit, because again, we're trying to get this guy right here that's almost, going to be almost 3/4 of an inch, a little bit better thick, okay? We're trying to bring that to welding temp with a piece that is 1/4 inch thick here and stuff that's 3/16 of an inch here. So there are so many places to actually melt this. The pucker factor is real. So what's going to happen is this heat is going to be slowly brought up. I'm going to have to be very careful. I'm going to have to bring this piece out and dunk it in water to keep it cool, and also pass it through the fire so that the majority of the heat is going here. This is going to be kind of a tough one. So let's pop it in there and let's get rocking. Now guys, you can see it's slowly coming up to heat. Notice that I went ahead and cooled that 1/4 of an inch piece in the quench bucket already. This is only at a cherry red heat, but I'm going to go ahead and flux it, and I'm going to start tapping to consolidate it, because when you do these welds, you don't want a loose piece. You want it to be contact so that the temperature is transferring evenly. Folks, you can see we are getting close to that welding heat. So what I'm doing is just coming in and consolidating very gently. Notice again, I am really keeping that piece a 1/4 inch cool. Now, one of the other things I want to point out to you guys is when you're doing these forge weldings, avoid having your work tilted at an angle, because what that means is that, you know, an inch difference in height is a tremendous difference in temperature. So when you're forge welding, try to keep your piece as level as possible in your fire. So guys, we are just at welding heat. We really don't have good sparklies, but we're at welding heat. Now again, this isn't a structural weld. We don't have to worry about holding anything with it. We just need it to stick. And I'll tell you, that looks close to what we're after, but I'm going to scrub it real quick. I'm going to hit it with the sprinkles one more again, and I'm going to take another weld. Okay, there's our full welding heat. Nothing seemingly melted. All right, boys and girls, and I think we have a good weld and our first screw up. So it just dawned on me, I welded the wrong ones first. Oh boy. So now, how do we solve this screw up? I'll be right back, boys and girls. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take those two pieces and we're just gonna round them, fold them all the way back up out of the way, and we should have enough clearance we can forge weld the ones in the front. We got this. Yep, folks, we're going to make this just a happy little accident. So we're going to put this bad boy in the vise. And then I'm going to take my tongs here and I'm going to fold these bad boys back like a beautiful flower. So that should be enough out of the way that we can get our other ones tacked into here. And I'll push these back a little bit further, but that should be enough space to get in there and forge weld the front ones. This is what it looks like when your metal goes, Jesus Christ, oh my God, what'd you do this time? All right, folks, welcome back to part 2 of how else am I going to screw up today. Now, you can see that I folded back these front tines here, so they're out of the way. That should be plenty of space. I've come in and put my tack welds on there, so just like before, I'll bring this up to heat. I'll sprinkle it, consolidate it, and then very carefully creep up on that heat. Now, even though we had this little conundrum here, I actually feel far better about this weld because that little thin piece of 1/4 inch sticking there that was worrying me, because if that piece fails, we are in trouble. But I think we're in a good spot. So let me see if I can't get this ready to go. All right, so absolutely babying this thing until I get it consolidated. I'm going to bring it in here and give her the sprinkles. Kind of mash and consolidate everything. We'll take a higher heat and I'll come back and do the same thing one more time, another flux, and then we will go for our first light welding heat. Okay, I think that's pretty well consolidated and fluxed. We're going to hit it again. Now, I am thinking that I'm going to cheat a little bit more, and I think I want to push those tips up just a tad, because the way I'm having to do this, I'm having a bit of a tough time getting that in there without getting it, with those tips getting in the way. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of cheat right there. All right, folks, here's our first light welding heat. Seems to have worked, so let's not lose any heat. Let's reflux. Let's do it one more time. All right, we got a little sparkly. Pucker factor 9,000, go. But boys and girls, I think we have ourselves a successful forge weld. Holy monkey. So guys, now what we're going to do is I'm going to do the initial curling with this piece in the vise. At that point, once we've done that, once I can fit it inside the trivet itself, then we're going to see about doing that last final forge weld of our wedge there, and we may be good to close, good to fair middling is what we may be. So let's get to the vise. Now guys, in the original piece, it's clear that they did not use any type of scroll iron. I don't think they really could have. It's clear that they just absolutely free-handed this piece. And so we are going to do something very similar. Now again, I don't know how far I've got to roll these things down to make them fit yet. So this is just going to be a placeholder. Notice that I'm actually making sure that that vise goes over the weld so it holds it in place, so I'm not putting pressure on that weld. Just in case that weld sucks, that will prevent it from coming loose. So guys, we're going to come right back here. I'm going to lock it in. And now this one I'm going to have to kind of undo what we did before. Again, I don't know. I have no measurements from the originals, so I'm just going to give ourselves a reasonable guess here and then adjust later. She done gone cold on me, right in my mouth. Yep. Okay, let's take a look at it as it would be in the frame. All right, so guys, here we are with problem number 634.5. Now, if you guys can see, where I set that piece of 1/4 inch is clearly not going to work. In fact, a lot of this needs to be moved on down. So I've got several problems here. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure that I can roll our top pieces back far enough to give me enough space to get that weld in there. And then I am probably going to have to unfurl these pieces so that I can get back down there to the bottom, and I'm going to have to redo that shank. So let me take another heat, unfurl these, and we'll take a look at it. So guys, you can see I peeled those top ones back, and I've got just enough to fit it in there. Now, the issue here is still right here. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to clip this completely off. I'm going to come back in with my spring swage, and I'm going to make a new shoulder and a new piece of 1/4 inch right there. At least that's the plan. Now I'm going to tell you, getting awful thin in that weld up there. It's going to hold, but buddy, we are warp 9 pucker factor right now. But I'm going to pull this off. Okay guys, I'm going to come in here and trim her right there. I'm going to make sure and take another measurement and know exactly where I need to come in size with my spring swage, and we're going to try this again. So I'm going to have to use a different spring swage here because this has actually got some height above the anvil. And even with that, these little tines here are interfering with me being able to rotate it to the side that I need. So I thought I had enough height to get away with it, but I'm actually going to come in, reheat these, and pull them back out of the way. One of the awesome things about metal is that in this craft you can move pieces out of the way and then put them back later. This is a great example of that. Now of course you never want to have to do that, but in a pinch, which we are definitely in, it can really save a project. All right, let's try that again. See if we can save this bad boy. And there we go. We can actually easily turn it and get to both sides. I am happy with that. Excellent. Now we're going to draw that out and clean that up. It's a pretty cool pattern too. Check that out. Not terrible, boys and girls. All right, let's draw this piece out. This will be plenty for our threaded rod. And one more heat to draw it out just a bit more and knock the edges off, and then we can start cleaning it up on the grinder. Okay, a little bit of shoulder work and some file work, and we should be very close. Now I'm going to check this against our piece right here. Boy, we sure could take a little bit more, couldn't we? About another 1/2 inch. You know what? I'm going to take another 1/2 inch just to be safe. I'm not saying that we couldn't have gotten away with that other. I'm saying it's hot out here and there's gnats, and I don't want to risk it. I'm gonna take another heat. Boy, doesn't that look good though. Let's take another heat and go a little bit more. I keep telling you how hot it is out here, and that gnats are a problem, and that when you do stuff without a plan, problems happen. You know, I've said all these things. If you didn't see it, right there with that last tap, the last tap using the spring swage, look what happened. One piece came off. So, what are we gonna do? Oh, we are far too invested at this point. We're going to fix this. So what's going to happen is I'm going to finish that piece right there. I'm going to pull out that corner trot, and then we're going to take these bad boys and we're going to roll them all the way back out of the way, and I am going to re-weld these pieces. Oh, they are going to be re-welded. This is going to be done today. Okay, I'm good to go with that. Let me get this forged down and we're ready to rock. I am going to cut that tail off though, because that's going to be unnecessary material. So we're just going to pinch it off right here. Tippy tappy, and now we're ready to go again. All right, let's pull this out real quick. And one more heat. There goes the other one. Oh, it's just not meant to be, ladies and gentlemen. One more heat. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're down to about a 400 grit on polishing this turd, okay? That's going to be good enough there. I'm going to take one more heat. You guys can see I've almost got a cold shut forming right there. So I'm going to tell you what, buddy, the difficulty today is considerable. I'm going to take one more heat, and I'm going to push my luck to welding heat to close that cold shut. And then we're going to try to unscrew this. All right, I think that closed it up. Look at there. Right. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to tap right over this joker. She just going to have to live with it. Okay, new plan. So since both of those smaller ones actually fell off, which, to be honest with you, is not a terrible thing, because when I decided where to weld those up, I didn't properly measure them against the triangle of the trivet itself. So what really needed to happen is they needed to be moved down. So now with both of them having fallen off, we can actually put them back in the right place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get 2 fresh pieces of that 1/2 inch by 3/16, 4 inches long, and I'm actually going to redo that weld with those in the appropriate place. So now I'm going to pop her in the vise. I'll fold the ones that are already welded down and away from the side of the weld, and we should be able to take care of this. Now again, I'm going to set this down in here. So before I bend this, I'm not stressing the weld. Okay, and that should be, once I hammer these down, they should be safely out of the way, and we can come back and do a second weld for our other pieces. Okay folks, we are tacked in, ready to give this another shot. Now one thing I really want to stress to you guys, now again, this has been an aggravation. Anytime that you have a piece that falls off in the middle of the demo, it's an aggravation. But I have also said before, sometimes it is better to start over from scratch instead of trying to polish that meaty turd. However, in this case, the fact is with those pieces off there, it should not be that big of a deal to re-weld the pieces in there. Sure, it's going to be some extra time, but that's where you have to learn to make a good judgment call. Do you just need to start over, or can it reasonably be salvaged? And in this case, it can reasonably be salvaged. This piece wide open, we're going to make sure and get in here and give it its first sprinkles. And now very carefully, I'll start the first consolidation. just mashing together, and I'll go ahead and take a higher heat, around 2200 degrees, and then start mushing it together and making sure everything is nice and tight. All right, looking good so far. Want to close up those gaps, and that's looking pretty good. I'm going to reflux, and now I'm going to take my first light welding heat. All right, guys, we got our first light welding heat. Again, I am just tippy tapping, just squeezing and consolidating. I'm going to flux it again, and I'm going to go back right for another heat and go for our full welding temperature. Okay, folks, we've got good heat. And guys, we have, for the second time today, a consolidated weld. Now, I'm gonna go over to the vise and start scrolling everything up and trying to make it look pretty. So, I'm about 10 minutes into adjusting the new version here, and I have to say, looking at the picture of the original, whatever poor bastard did this one to start with, he and I are having the same issues. Ta-da! It looks so bad. However, we're going with it, baby. We've been filming all day. We've had about 3 breaks. But we're about to put this joker in the trivet. I promise you, we're going to get this done today. So guys, here we go. It will fit. There's going to need to be some adjustment in there, but that's not going to be a problem. Now, what I'm going to do though, is I'm going to heat up that hole right there, because I know that my joint right here isn't perfect, and I really want to kind of cram that thing down in there so it fits snugly. So I'll take one more heat. We're going to go to the anvil, and then we're going to tippy tap this joker down in there. All right, guys, we're going to set that bad boy right in there, and she falls right in. Look at that. Just going to have enough, but I guarantee you, boys and girls, this is going to work today. Promise you, 100%. I'll make sure she's lined up. I'm taking it out. I lied, guys. I'm covering my butt. I'm going to pull that tip out just a little bit more, so I got a little bit extra to get in that weld. Not today, Satan. So I'm going to come in right here. I'm going to focus on that portion. All right, I'm going to try it against the piece and see how that looks. All right, folks, we're going to try this one more time. These pieces are hot. I've got just enough to get in there in that weld. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go make sure and fix this thing into place, and then we're going to see about closing it up. She's looking good now. Going to fix her in place, try to get our weld. So now I still would love to have brought that out a little bit more, but again, we're dealing with what we've got. What I'll do now is I'll come in and actually I'm going to heat these legs up. Actually, I've got to heat this portion up to bring these arms down a little bit, because they're actually keeping this open. So I'll bring these down a little bit and then cinch these and then go in for that weld. All right, guys, again, I'm going to come in here with my scrolling tongs. And I'm not worried about the final form of these pieces. I just need to get them pulled in a little bit so that I can bring these two pieces together. Now, my angles were not perfect to start with, so if I allow myself a little bit of latitude, there we go. And it's time for the sprinkles. So guys, this is going to be a bit of an extra difficult weld just for the starting, because what happens is I don't have a way to actually keep all those pieces together very well without going in and putting another tack weld in there. So what I'm going to try to do is get my light welding heat, again, tippy tap just to get it to stick, and then come back and take a heavier welding heat. Here we go. Okay, we're looking pretty good so far. Going to hit it with the sprinkles one more time. I'm going to try to work that heat a little closer up to that 2-inch joint right there. Still not a full welding heat, but I'm going to line it up and I'm going to go back in for it. Sprinkle, sprinkle. And that should be her. Our next problem is going to be actually drawing out the feet here, because what's going to happen is we're going to take these 2-inch sections and we're going to draw them down into our feet. The issue is much like in our hoe video, we're going to be hammering dead along the weld seam, and that can cause it to give way, which at this point I'm sure you understand my feelings about such a thing happening. So the trick to doing this is to be slow with your progression and pulling these feet out. So I'll take a heat, I will actually turn a small portion on the bottom here for the pad of the foot, and we're going to take it nice and easy and pull our feet out. So to start this, I'm going to hang about 1/2 inch over the shoulder, and I'm going to hammer down into that shoulder, and you guys can see the little foot that it's making. There we go, we got us a foot. Now what I'll do is come in and I'm going to take another heat and I'm going to taper this portion. I'm probably going to pull it out to about 5 inches and then I'll turn it down at the shoulder. And we're going to repeat this for all 3 of the legs. So let me get this one done, show you it, and then we'll do the other ones off camera. Now I'm going to tell you, one of the aggravating things about this, and I think I'm going to switch over to an anvil block, is when I turn this up to keep it square, you can see that it's throwing that leg. So this is where an anvil block is going to come in handy. So I'm going to see if I can't find one of mine. All right, let's see if that gives us a little bit more flexibility. And oh yes, sir, it very much does. Okay, that looks like that is going to be good enough for our first leg, and now we just need to repeat that on our other ones. Hallelujah! Thank you, Jesus. So it looks like that we have managed to pull out our feet. Nothing has come loose. Everything's gonna be okay. All right. So now we've got these pulled out, only thing we need to do now is we need to go to our vise. We're going to take a heat and we're going to turn our feet down. I am going to use the vise because I am going to continue to baby those welds, and I do want a nice sharp corner there. Now, how exactly is that going to fit well into the vise? I don't know, but we're going to give it a shot. Now, I was worried about being able to get this into the vise properly, but it looks like I'm going to be good to go. It's going to clamp very well, and so now I'm just going to come in. I absolutely would not recommend trying to do this over the anvil. That's a tapered piece and it's also very thick, and so that's going to give you just massive problems if you try to do that on the anvil. And the other thing is here, you can be smart about how you use your vise, and you can see if we've got a little bend or something like that, we can come in here and straighten her back up with relatively no problem. But now one thing here, you can see I'm getting cold, and that means I've got to use more force. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to go back and take another heat. We are not going to wail on this joker. We want to make sure she moves in there nice and easy. All right, we're going to go right back into here, straighten that guy up. A couple of tippy taps and I think we're good to go. We're getting a little distortion right there. I should be able to clean that up on the anvil, but the weld appears to hold and we have a nice foot. So let's just do this on the other sides. So guys, again, I've taken a high heat, and off camera, just to let you know, some of these welds were just not, after we've been playing with them, they moved a little bit. So I went back and just gave them a touch up. Actually, it gets off a little bit, but a little bit of fixing up on top of the anvil should put that right back where it needs to be. Okay guys, we're going to lock this in for the last leg. All right, let's go to the top of the anvil and clean her up. So hopefully, a couple of polite hammer taps, and we should be able to put that back reasonably straight, which we have. Okay, my goodness, to say the least. So we now have our 3 legs down. I have no idea if they're even, but they should be relatively close. I'm going to take one more heat just to make sure and kind of align this as best as we can. And then, thank goodness, we should be done with the forging part of this bad boy. And we can move on to our final handle, cleaning this girl up and seeing what she looks like. Okay guys, so now I'm going to tell you something. I did not really have a good idea on how to do this. Most likely the original was not threaded. Could be, but I'm not certain because we're going to have a wooden handle on here. So what I'm going to do is I am actually going to thread this one. And of course, this is the modern thread cutter here. Make sure you always lubricate your threads. And hopefully I should be close enough with the diameter of my piece because it did match the 1/4 inch hole but getting these things started is always the problem, especially when you're doing this stuff by hand. Always an aggravation. A lot of you guys don't know this, but I was actually a gunsmith for a couple of years. Taps and threading, of course, are a tremendous portion of that. And buddy, the guy that taught me, Pat Felix, who's up in Fort Benning, you had to be so extra careful with taps, because when you're working on a gun, the taps are very small, and of course to cut the threads they have to be very hard. That means that they're brittle. We were working on an A5 shotgun, which is an old type of shotgun, Belgian, and I broke a tap in the receiver on one of them things, and 20 years later, I still feel the butt whooping. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn ourselves a handle for this piece. Now, we're probably not going to thread the actual wood. We're just going to drill it to the size that it would be for tapping, and then we're just going to let the magic of wood do the rest. Now, I don't have to go all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to go as far as I can, though. But even if it didn't go all the way down, what I would do is I'd actually relieve the handle of the wood a little bit, oversize the hole for the first 1/4 inch or so, and that would solve our problem. But for a forged piece, it looks like that my 1/4 inch was close enough. The threads are taking. It doesn't look too exceptionally janky. Now, if you guys are not familiar with threading, if you see me kind of going back and forth, what happens is when I'm actually turning this, it's peeling metal, what we call chips. But if you just keep going, it can clog everything up. So what I do is you go back a little bit and you break the chips out. And we're just going to do this all the way down. I think that's going to be good. We'll take this bad boy off. And folks, now we get to deviate from the blacksmith's paths, and we're going to do a little bit of wood turning. You're not a proper blacksmith unless you know how to work the wood. Okay guys, now I have this very nice little jet mini lathe. This is on loan from a good friend of mine, Albert Rash. So this has proven to be a handy little tool. So I'm going to chuck her up in here. I have a block of our famous pecan wood, and I just need to get her lined up here with the tippy tappies, and I think we're going to be good to go. Excellent. And let's make sure she's cranked down, and it'll take a second to kind of burn her in. Now guys, I gotta tell you, if you don't know, one of my guilty pleasures is woodworking. As much as I love ironwork, I really enjoy turning stuff. Now the crazy thing is, I want a big bowl lathe so bad I can taste it. And I almost got one. It was super expensive, because they have got some bowl lathes out there that are, my gosh, you just would not believe how incredible they are. I think we're ready to go. So now one of the crazy things is I don't have really great modern tools, but what I do have are some of the tools that we made for our portable thing. So I'm actually going to be using our handmade tools to do this work. Let's start here. Now this handle should be pretty simple. Now notice I did go ahead and take the corners off. There's a lot of people that don't do that, and it just makes an unnecessary vibration and aggravation. Now, of course, the first thing I'm going to do is just get this rounded up. And before anybody starts hollering at me, I'm going to take my glove off. Looking good. Clean that up just a tad bit more. Okay, so let's start shaping our piece. Whoa. That's the only thing I don't like about this lathe. She is on wheels, And if you put any significant pressure on there, she's going to move on you. I think we are absolutely getting there. I'm going to do just a little bit more cleaning and a little bit more shaping. I'm going to grab one of my other tools here just so I can get in a little bit closer and start doing some parting lines. And then we're going to sand her and cut her loose. Now, my only particular thing about this is I know that this whole piece kind of needs to sit somewhat low, because if this piece is too wide, it's probably going to interfere with the pot itself. So we're going to have to probably come in here and thin this considerably. I was hoping to leave my nice front on there, but I don't think that's going to be in the cards for us. So let me go back to the gouge. Okay, I think that's going to be a lot closer to what we're after. And let's get a little sanding action going on. It's got to be my favorite part of turning anything, is bringing that finish down into something really beautiful. So this is 120 grit. This does an excellent job of getting out any of those other tool marks. Okay, yeah, that's good. That's pretty. So I'm going to hit it with a little bit of 220, and we're going to call it good. Now, my main problem when I get into doing this type of stuff is I kind of get the psychosis of where I want this thing to be like glass, because it's just it's so easy to put beautiful finishes on this stuff, unlike with knives where you have to hand sand it for a couple of years for it really to get a great finish. I think we're going to hold that right there. Now, one thing I am going to do is I am going to continue, since we know this is a straight line and I've actually got a hole in this end, I'm going to pop this bad boy in the drill press, and I'm going to drill this, not with 1/4 inch, but with the actual drill size, that as if you were going to thread it for 1/4 inch, and that should give us a tight fit, and it should bite into the threads that we've done on the piece. I'm probably going to go down about that far. May have to shave a little bit of that off, but that will be okay. Let's drill it and let's give it a shot. So guys, here is our nice handle. We brought it down to a 220 grit finish, and I just hit it with a little bit of oil. Again, looking good for what we're doing. So now all we need to do is pop this bad boy in the vise, crank her on down, and see how well she fits. Let's go take care of it. Okay, so guys, I ended up drilling this out to 3/16, and if you'll notice, not even the damn hole is centered. It's been cleverly offset to allow maximum clearance for the pot. I just want you to know that's exactly the story that I am giving you, and the one that you should believe. So now we got a lot of thread to cover here. So you just want to take the wood firmly in your hand, apply downward pressure pressure and twist. Now hopefully what's going to happen is that 3/16 should be enough to bite, but not so much that it's going to bind as I work it all the way down. She's looking good. Okay, so guys, she's seated fairly well. She's on there good and tight, so I'm going to call that a win. So let's unlock it and take a look. Holy monkey, what a project. Good Lord, what a project. So guys, I surely hope you have enjoyed this. This is a good looking piece. However, nothing is completely straight. It's completely janky looking. And you know the amazing thing is though, it looks just like it could have come out of the Sorber collection book. One of the things I love about doing this work is, again, I have not done one of these before, so I just kind of tore off into it. And I know that I ran across every problem that the guy that made the original one did. I mean, it is absolutely obvious to me now why everything looks like it did. Without proper jigs and things of that nature, freehanding everything, boy, it is a monkey. But you know, from 50 feet, that's a really good looking piece. And there are some really challenging technical issues here, especially when it comes to the forge welds, as you saw. So guys, I'm gonna tell you something. I'm as much of a monkey as this has been, pretty proud of this one. This looks pretty freaking awesome. So guys, again, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you being here. This has been 2 days of filming between heat and gnats. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please, 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 please think about going over to Patreon/Purgatory Ironworks, because these videos are brought to you by our Patreons. Mark Blosser, Cory Cooper, among a host of others. Cannot thank them enough for their massive support of what we're doing now. Guys, thank you so much, and I hope to see you again right here, Purgatory Ironworks.